A glimpse across millennia, the dream of the Loire River goddess. This painting by Kaizhi embodies the pinnacle of Chinese romance. When we speak of the pinnacle of ancient Chinese art, one painting has always stood at the forefront of time. It allows Kaizhi's profound affection to still stir people's hearts after millennia, renders Kaizhi's exquisite brushwork a Bible for later painters, and even turns the name, Loire River Goddess, into the ultimate symbol of romance and regret in the hearts of the Chinese people. This masterpiece is the nymph of the Loire River, a legendary work brimming with countless, divine details. Today, we will not only follow its delicate, silk-like brush strokes into this millennia-old love story between a mortal and a goddess, but also delve beyond the ink to understand the unique spiritual code and artistic philosophy of the Chinese people hidden within, and recognize its distinctive place in the landscape of world civilization. Welcome to subscribe to the World Ming channel. Next, we will provide a comprehensive interpretation of the nymph of the Loire River for all our friends. First, meet painting enthusiast Kaizhi, a trailblazer of the Eastern Jin dynasty, 317–420 AD, and a humanistic awakener who rewrote art history with a brush. To understand the nymph of the Loire River, we must first understand the man who elevated painting from a craft to a philosophy, Kaizhi. He lived during the Eastern Jin dynasty, 317–420 AD, a unique cultural interlude in Chinese history. After the fall of the Western Jin dynasty, noble clans migrated south. The upheaval caused by dynastic change, ironically, freed the scholar official class from the constraints of the Han dynasties, Confucian classics for practical use, and turned their pursuit toward spiritual freedom. It was in this era that calligraphy evolved from practical writing into an art form. Wang Ziz's preface to the Orchid Pavilion, described as floating like clouds and dancing like a dragon, is the embodiment of personal spirit, through brush and ink, and painting, for the first time, shifted from depicting the afterlife in tomb murals and functional decoration on artifacts to pure artistic creation that expresses personal emotions and thoughts. Kaizhi was precisely the leader of this artistic and humanistic revolution. His three excellences were never merely a display of outstanding talent, but a profound reconstruction of the essence of art. The core of his excellence in painting is people-centeredness. Before him, most painters portrayed figures in a symbolic manner. Emperors were always majestic, and immortals were always fantastical. However, Kaizhi proposed the concept of conveying spirit through form, advocating capturing the soul of a figure through their eyes and posture. When he painted the Loire River goddess, he did not just depict her appearance as an immortal, but more importantly, the intertwining of divinity and humanity. When he painted Kaizhi, he did not just represent his identity as a prince, but rather his vulnerability and perseverance amid the conflict between ideals and reality. This concept of painting people as true humans emerged nearly 1,000 years earlier than the European Renaissance, marking the earliest awakening of humanism in Chinese art. The essence of his excellence in talent lies in the unity of poetry and painting. He did not paint just for the sake of painting, but integrated the artistic conception of literature with the visual expression of painting. Before creating the nymph of the Loire River, he studied Kaizhi's Rhapsody repeatedly. Instead of mechanically reproducing the image of the goddess dancing like a startled swan, he transformed the melancholy of unrequited love and the regret of the divide between humans and immortals in the text into the rhythm of brushstrokes and the mood of colors. This creative concept of integrating literature into painting later evolved into the core tradition of the unity of poetry, calligraphy, painting, and seal carving in Chinese art, making art no longer a mere display of techniques, but a comprehensive expression of emotions and ideas. The heart of his excellence in devotion is the purity of art. He locked his paintings in a cabinet for limited viewing, not out of arrogance, but to defend the dignity of art in an era when art still served the powerful. He insisted that painting is the story in one's heart, and refused to reduce his creations to tools of power. This purity of art for art's sake freed his works from utilitarianism, allowing them to carry more eternal humanistic value. It was such an awakener who, amid the cultural tide of the Eastern Jin dynasty, established a millennium-long benchmark of people-centered and emotion-driven for Chinese art with the nymph of the Loire River. The millennia-old love story in the painting, more than a love tale, it's the aesthetics of regret of the Chinese people. The nymph of the Loire River is a narrative scroll that tells a story, but it never merely recounts a simple love story between a mortal and an immortal. Through a 4-act narrative, Kaizhi elevated Kaizhi's personal regret into the shared aesthetics of regret of the Chinese people, and this is the spiritual core that allows the painting to transcend millennia. Act 1. encountering the immortal by the Loire River, the thrill and awe of first seeing an ideal. Cao Jis, astonishment at the sight of the goddess, when he first met her was essentially a moment when an ideal came to life. The Loire River goddess symbolized not just a beautiful woman, but also Cao Jis longing for something beautiful, pure, and unattainable. After his political setbacks, Guxi did not paint the goddess as an aloof immortal, but endowed her with a distant shyness. This sense of distance, to be admired from afar but not profaned, perfectly mirrors the Chinese people's attitude toward ideals, feeling a spark of excitement yet holding reverence, yearning yet knowing restraint. Act 2. The gods playing matchmaker, the sweetness and sobriety of beautiful illusions. The gods' various matchmaking efforts are much like our own self-consolation when facing ideals. The harmonious melody of the qin and xiao, and the guidance of the literary fish, all make it seem as if the ideal is within reach. However, the foreshadowing planted by Guxi, that Cao Ju and the goddess were always just one step away from touching each other, reveals the truth. Beauty is often an illusion that is so close yet so far. This sober sweetness reflects the Chinese people's profound understanding of happiness, not pursuing absolute perfection, but cherishing the process of approaching beauty. Act 3. The moment of separation, restraint and dignity in the shattering of an ideal. The silent sorrow at the moment of separation is the most touching expression of the aesthetics of regret. In the entire scroll, there is no loud weeping or heart-wrenching grief, only Cao Jis leaning body and the goddess drooping sleeves. This restrained sorrow holds the dignity of the Chinese people when facing loss. We never deny the existence of regret, but we refuse to let regret turn into embarrassment. Just as the goddess finally drifted away gracefully, and Cao Ju eventually drove forward, separation is not an end, but a moment of clarity, to keep the beauty in memory. Act 4. The carriage departing, longing and growth in eternal regret. Cao Jis, glance back, is the spiritual focal point of the entire scroll. He finally left the Loire River, but kept the goddess in his heart. This choice of moving forward with regret perfectly embodies the Chinese people's philosophy of growth. Regret is never a burden, but nourishment that enriches life. Just as each of us will experience people we have missed and dreams we have not achieved, it is precisely these regrets that teach us to cherish the present and understand moving forward with longing. Guxi's brilliance lies in the fact that he did not give the story a happy ending. Through leaving blank spaces, he told us, regret itself is a form of perfection. This aesthetics of regret has run through the entire history of Chinese culture, from longing day and night for what one cannot have in the Book of Songs, to Sushis, people have joys and sorrows, the moon waxes and wanes, and even to our modern resonance with unfulfilled desires. The nymph of the Loire River has long been more than a painting. It is a spiritual comfort for the Chinese people when facing regret. The pinnacle of Eastern Jin aesthetics, more than technical innovation, it's the philosophical expression of Chinese art. The techniques in the nymph of the Loire River were never about showcasing skills. Behind each technique lies the philosophical thinking of Chinese art, and this is the fundamental reason why it has become the source code of art. 1. Ancient silk like brushstrokes. The Eastern wisdom of overcoming hardness with softness, the thin yet strong quality of ancient silk like brushstrokes, echoes the Taoist philosophy of overcoming hardness with softness. The brushstrokes have no sharp changes in thickness, yet they can support the dignity of figures and the vitality of flowing water, just like the Chinese people's character, gentle yet resilient, reserved yet powerful. This strength hidden in softness in brushstrokes later became a spiritual symbol of Chinese art. The water-stained texture in calligraphy and Tai Chi in martial arts all follow the same logic of taking softness as beauty. 2. Elegant colors. The spiritual pursuit of prioritizing meaning over color. Guxi's choice of light and elegant colors and rejection of gaudy, piled-up hues essentially reflect the value orientation of prioritizing spirit over material. The light dyeing of azurite blue and malachite green was not a result of inadequate technique, but an active choice. He wanted to shift viewers' attention from the gorgeousness of colors to the delicacy of emotions, just as Chinese culture never pursues external ostentation, but focuses on internal cultivation. This aesthetic of prioritizing meaning over color later evolved into the supremacy of ink wash in literati painting, making art a carrier of spiritual cultivation. 3. Scattered perspective. The spatial concept of harmony between man and nature. The no fixed viewpoint of scattered perspective, breaks the human-centered nature of Western linear perspective, and embodies the Chinese people's spatial philosophy of harmony between man and nature. We do not see ourselves as the subject observing the world, but as a part integrated into the world. Following Shaoji's line of sight, viewers wander, sometimes by the banks of the Loire River, sometimes beneath the clouds. This immersive experience unites humans with nature and the story, echoing the Chinese people's cosmic view of all things coexisting. 4. Conveying spirit through form, the view of life as unity of form and spirit. The core of conveying spirit through form is the Chinese people's understanding of life. We do not separate external form from internal soul, but believe that form is the carrier of spirit, and spirit is the soul of form. When Guxi painted the goddess' slightly drooping eyes and Shaoji's furrowed brows, he conveyed spiritual emotions through the details of form. This concept of unity of form and spirit later extended to traditional Chinese medicine, calligraphy, martial arts, and other fields, becoming the underlying logic for the Chinese people to understand the world. Across time dialogue, more than style differences, it's the essential distinction in civilizational thinking. When comparing the nymph of the Loire River with foreign paintings of the same period, 4th to early 5th century AD, what we see is not just a difference in artistic style, but an essential distinction in civilizational thinking between the East and the West. Guxi's work has long transcended the category of painting and become an early testament to China's humanistic spirit. 1. Compared with Europe, religious divinity versus humanistic humanity. Emperor Justinian and his retinue from the late Roman Empire uses a golden background to symbolize divine radiance, and the figures have a solemn and rigid appearance. It essentially embodies the thinking that religion serves imperial power, and art serves religion. Humans are followers of gods, and vassals of imperial power, without independent emotions or souls. In contrast, Shaoju in the nymph of the Loire River has moments of infatuation and melancholy, while the goddess has moments of shyness and reluctance. Humans are the subjects of emotions, and art is the expression of humanity. This humanism first thinking emerged nearly 1,000 years earlier than the awakening of humanism in the European Renaissance, vividly demonstrating the people-centered nature of Chinese civilization. 2. Compared with India, religious education versus emotional resonance. The Jataka tale of Prince Vesantara in India's Ajanta caves uses exaggerated movements and gaudy colors to tell the doctrine of almsgiving. The core of this art is religious education. Viewers are expected to understand Buddhist teachings from the story and gain spiritual salvation. In contrast, the nymph of the Loire River conveys no doctrine, only emotions. It does not require you to learn something, but hopes you feel something, the thrill of infatuation, the sorrow of regret, and the longing of missing someone. This emotion-centered art reflects the trait of Chinese civilization of valuing emotions over preaching. We believe that emotional resonance nourishes the soul more than preaching principles. 3. Compared with Persia, worship of royal power versus personal expression. The royal portraits of the Persian Sassanid dynasty, 224–651 AD, use majestic postures and simple brushstrokes to emphasize the sacredness of royal power. Art served as a propaganda tool for royal power. Kings were regarded as incarnations of gods, without vulnerability or regret. In contrast, Shaoju in the nymph of the Loire River, despite being a noble, shows the vulnerability of unfulfilled desire. Art does not serve power, but only personal emotions. This thinking of prioritizing the individual over power is an early reflection of China's people are the foundation of the state ideology in art, forming a sharp contrast with the Persian civilizational logic of royal power above all. From these comparisons, we can clearly see, while the art of other civilizations in the world was still serving external authorities, religion, royal power, Chinese art had already begun to focus on internal humanity, emotions, soul. The foresight of the nymph of the Loire River is essentially the foresight of China's humanistic spirit. Why is it a national treasure among national treasures? It's more than a precious artwork, it's a spiritual totem of Chinese civilization. The nymph of the Loire River has become a national treasure among national treasures, not because of its ancient age or exquisite techniques. Its value lies in the fact that it is a living carrier of the spiritual genes of Chinese civilization, and every brushstroke contains the Chinese people's way of thinking, emotional patterns, and value pursuits. 1. Artistic gene, defining the humanistic direction of Chinese art, the literary painting, and conveying spirit through form, initiated by it have made Chinese art always take humans as the core and emotions as the soul, distinguishing it from the Western art path that takes religion as the core and techniques as the soul. Later painters such as Yun Liban, Wu Daoxuan, and Wen Zhengming essentially created within Guxis humanistic framework. It is not just the source of Chinese art, but more importantly, its direction. 2. Emotional gene, carrying the Chinese people's aesthetics of regret, the restrained sorrow, and sober regret it conveys have become a spiritual template for the Chinese people when facing emotions in life. We never pursue absolute perfection, but know how to coexist with regret and turn regret into nourishment for longing. This aesthetics of regret is hidden in our resonance with unfulfilled desires and our cherishing of the past, becoming an important part of the Chinese people's emotional identity. 3. Civilizational gene, witnessing the humanistic awakening of Chinese civilization. In the 4th century world, when other civilizations were still worshipping divinity and revering royal power, China had already demonstrated the civilized height of focusing on humanity and respecting emotions through the nymph of the Loire River. This humanistic awakening was not an accidental, artistic innovation, but an inevitable result of the people are the foundation of the state and people-oriented ideology in Chinese civilization. It proves that Chinese civilization has had the deep-seated gene of respecting people and caring for people since its origin.